is crucial, in the sense that Obamacare passed in the United States House of Representatives by only 2 votes when it passed a couple of years ago. Every single Republican voted against it, 32 Democrats voted against it, and it passed by 2 votes. If one more Democrat were a Republican, we wouldn't be talking about it today. And the whole concept of it just seems amusing to me, that children, up until age 26, children will stay on mommy and daddy's health insurance. And it's interesting that they could vote when they're 18, but they can't pay for their own health insurance until they're 26 years of age. They could actually give their life for their country in the military at age 18, but they can't fend for themselves and pay their own health insurance until they're 26 years of age. And I would think that if Barack Obama didn't have such a stronghold on the 18 to 26-year-old age group, I would venture to guess he would try to raise the minimum voting age to age 26 and undo the 26th Amendment. So, but with these 2 big issues on our plate, you know, there's a very interesting thing that happened yesterday that just kind of flew under the radar that no one's talking about, which is the fact that the city of Stockton, California went bankrupt. This is the largest. I have never been there. I'm not planning a trip right now, but well, let me put it this way. It is the largest city in the history of the United States to declare bankruptcy. They have more than triple the population of Miami Beach, and no one's talking about it. And I will say that, in my opinion, with due respect to the state of California, they are a showcase of Obamanomics in action. They're living, breathing testimony to their economic policies. In the last 3 years, welfare spending has gone up by 41%. 1/3 of all welfare dollars. Hope you guys don't mind if I editorialize a little bit. You're only having salad anyway. So, 1/3 of all welfare dollars have been spent in the state of California. 12% of the United States lives in California. They have a projected $64 billion annual budget deficit that, of course, they're going to turn to the rest of us to help them with. How do they get away with it? In a few words, they got 53 seats in the U.S. House and 55 electoral votes in the Electoral College. So they have a way of getting things done. I remember a couple of years ago when they ran out of money to pay their state workers, so they issued them IOUs, and then shortly thereafter they released 26,000 prisoners under house arrest because they couldn't afford to keep them in prison. And interestingly enough, well, no one seemed to have made this connection, that same day they opened a $7 million cage for 3 golden monkeys at the LA County Zoo. They could have just made it simple and made it the cage for the prisoners. But anyhow, again, Obamanomics in action, and it looks like it's getting worse. But the moral of the story is there's no free stuff, it's your stuff, and they're giving it to people that not only can't, but won't. As you know, 99 weeks of unemployment, you know, what was meant to be a trampoline has become a hammock. And of course, recently Obama made it legal for 800,000 I'm not supposed to say illegal, undocumented workers are now able to work, and unfortunately they're diluting the workforce and taking the jobs of what otherwise would be given to American tax-paying citizens in exchange for their votes. Well, I guess it is their votes because a lot of illegals have voted, but obviously they have family members that are willing to vote to help them with their and Obama's agenda. But interestingly enough, Obamacare is technically called the Affordable Care Act, and it's going to insure 32 million, not Americans, but people, millions of whom are undocumented. And I don't see how you could stretch a fabric over 32 million more people and somehow it becomes thicker and of higher quality as you stretch it. And my point is, if it's called the Affordable Care Act and it's so affordable, why don't they just pay for it themselves? Instead of having us pay for it, it's nice of them to make it affordable for us to buy them health insurance. Thank you. So, thank you. In any event, Barack Obama has spent $6 trillion of money of our kids and our grandkids over the last 3 years. And I remember when he was campaigning in North Dakota in 2007, and his words were that George W. Bush was guilty of treason because he spent $8 trillion in 4 years. That's $500 billion a year. He has spent $2 trillion a year. So if $500 billion makes you guilty of treason, what does quadruple that make you? It makes you Barack Obama. So, you know, when Ronald Reagan first spoke in front of the joint sessions of Congress, he wanted to help them wrap their arms around what $1 trillion was. And here's how he did it. he explained that if you took $1,000 bills and stacked them the thin way with a rubber band around them, 4 inches is $1 million. Ask yourself how thick it would be to be $1 trillion. Now, if you said 63.3 miles, you would be correct. So that means that it would take $1,000 bills stacked the thin way with a rubber band around them from the tip of Key West halfway to Canada to pay off our national debt. To make it more tangible, if you look at $100 bills, by the way, you could stack them 7 feet high and cover every inch of a football field. That's also $1 trillion. So most of us are within the top 10% of income earners, and as you probably have already heard, the top 10% pay 70% of the federal taxes. So picture this. One of you goes to dinner with 9 other people, and the bill comes out and it's $500. But instead of each of you paying $50, you pay $350, and they each chip in $15, and they say you didn't pay your fair share. So I guess my question is, what exactly would equate to the fair share of the top 10%? I guess enough is never enough, per the limousine liberals. This year we're going to spend $668 billion on our welfare budget. For the first time ever, it's the same as military spending. And the federal government's going to spend $20,610 per person in the United States, and obviously you guys are going to be the ones paying for it. There's also legislation on the table to prevent you from sheltering your money in a 401k plan, as has historically been the case, because he would rather have that money to give to undocumented workers to buy their votes. So he wants to stop you from putting your money in your 401k. Fortunately, Florida tried to do what we call a voter purge, which the liberals like to call voter suppression. I'd like to call it voter justice. We are preventing people who shouldn't be voting from voting. Now bear in mind that Acorn had people that not only couldn't legally vote, but had voted over 50 times in the last presidential election. And we're trying to stop that, and the administration of transparency is trying to stop us from voter purging. I mean, to me it's a disgrace, but somehow they think it's okay. And by the way, I'm very proud that Florida is the first state that is now doing drug testing for welfare recipients, and we should be proud of ourselves for doing that as well. When Obama first took office 3 years ago, 41% of the United States didn't pay federal income tax. We are now up to 49% that don't pay a dime in federal income tax. So the bottom half of income earners are trying to tell the top half of income earners how to spend their money on them, and that whatever you're giving them is not enough. To me, it's the equivalent of having a guest in your house that doesn't pay you any rent, but they want to tell you what you should cook for them, and by the way, now you're giving them health care on top of it. So, and they're saying that that's not fair enough. The average household income, by the way, is now down $4,000 in the last 3 years. Interestingly enough, another point no one seems to be mentioning is the fact that government itself has become its own special interest. There are now 16 million people that work for the government, and the average person is going to have one person that's willing to vote their way in order to keep their job. So to me, it's almost a given that you have 32 million people that are willing to vote for bigger and bigger government. Why? Because either they or their immediate family works for the government. The limousine liberals would also have you believe that in order to create a better world, we have to move backwards ourselves. Well, I don't believe that you can strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. And obviously, the left wing does believe in that, and they're trying to execute that, including execute us. The other point is, it is true. That wasn't on my script, by the way, but I believe it. When the government first came out, bear in mind, it only had 2 roles. It was foreign policy and national security. And in 1913, when they first came out with the Internal Revenue Service, the top tax rate was 7%. Look how we've expanded government. Look what the top tax rate is now. And I'm just talking federal. Look at all the other taxes you pay. It reads like a laundry list. But in any event, I do have to touch upon the military, because we are here because they are there. And over the Fairchild Air Force Base in the state of Washington, there is a flag that flies, and it says, "Peace is our profession." And it was the mantra, as many of you know, of Ronald Reagan, of peace through strength, okay? We are a country that has no territorial ambitions, as exemplified by our behavior after World War II, where we could have done anything. And rather than do anything aggressive, All we did is send billions of dollars to Europe to help them with their problems. We didn't take an inch of an acre of another country, and we could have. So someone also pointed out to me, interestingly enough, that if the radical Islamists put down their weapons in the Middle East, there would be no more violence in the Middle East. If Israel put down their weapons in the Middle East, there would be no more Israel. I'm sure many of you have heard that, and it's an unfortunate situation. And we have a president who's never been to Israel, who has abandoned Israel, and for some reason, they anticipate 67% of all Jews are going to vote for Obama. Those are what you call them, Bill, for Democrats. I wish I had the answer to that, but that's a great letter. I don't know. So, but look, the best way to win a war, look, no one wins a war, it's just who loses less. The best way to win it is to stay out of it, and the best way to stay out of it is to have leadership which exemplifies a military might that is so strong that no one wants to test our military or the temperance of our leaders that command it. But obviously that is no longer the case, and unfortunately war doesn't determine who's right, it just determines who's left. And
that's very good.
you know what, that's a good question. I think that I'm in the bathroom if you want me to be honest.
What'd she say? Yes. What'd she say?
Well, in any event, maybe I should spend more time in the bathroom and come up with better stuff. If I'm too long, my daughter knocks. Well, anyhow, my feeling is that bureaucrats should start to shrink the size of their spending rather than shrinking the size of our paychecks. And I would say that they spend like drunken sailors. This one, by the way, I stole from Ronald Reagan. I would say they spend like drunken sailors, but it would be unfair to drunken sailors because at least they spend their own money. I can't steal his line. I respect him too much. All right? The individual Medicare rates have skyrocketed, by the way. Last year was $96. This year, $104. Next year, $120. In 2014, it goes to $247. It doubles. All right? It's just unmanageable. They say that government should do whatever is necessary, but only what is necessary, because government should work for the people, not the reverse. And unfortunately, we see that it is the reverse. And I think what we need, and by the way, contrary to Barack Obama's assertion that we are no longer a Judeo-Christian nation, I think what we need to do is to get back to the bedrock foundation of the principles which formed this country, which, in my opinion, is still a Judeo-Christian country, which welcomes religions of all types, just not their weapons. And I will say this, that going to church or going to synagogue doesn't make you any more of a Christian or a Jew than standing in a garage makes you a car. So going back to our traditional values, I think would be something that would be, Tom likes it, so it must be good, that I think would be fundamental to doing a 180 in terms of what's been happening. But being that we're being pushed off of a fiscal cliff, I'll leave you with one last cute analogy. I appreciate your compliments on the others. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate your applause. But I'm going to leave you with one last analogy, since we are being pushed off this fiscal cliff, is that we need to prepare ourselves for what's happening in the future. And I'm going to remind you, you don't need a parachute to skydive. You just need a parachute to skydive twice. Okay? So, in any event, it's my pleasure, my privilege, and my honor to introduce somebody who I could say, if there is a godfather of the Republican Party in Florida, a legendary man. He was the first registered Republican Jew in the state of Florida, the 10th registered Republican in Florida. He has done more for our country than perhaps anyone that I know. Some say he's planted the redwoods. I don't know what else to say, but I will tell you this. Many of you have had kids that you put through college, and you know the difficulty of putting kids through college. The man I'm going to introduce you to has put 400,000 kids through college through a $9 billion trust. He was president of the National Resolution Trust Fund. I would list his resume, but we'd be going past dinner, okay? It is called the Stanley G. Tate Florida Prepaid Trust Fund. And with no further ado, Mr. Stanley G. Tate.
Yes.